There's a lot of stuff going on with Hunter Biden. So yesterday, the House of Representatives officially has passed an impeachment inquiry into President Biden relating to Hunter Biden's business dealings. Here was the moment that that happened.
On this vote, the yeas are 221 and the nays are 212. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
That is an official impeachment inquiry for those who covered the 2 impeachments, which we did, certainly. The impeachment inquiry is the predecessor to a formal impeachment. It basically authorizes Congress, gives them subpoena power to look into and to investigate whatever they deem necessary, as opposed to what's put forward to them in the resolution. It also, though, came at the exact same time that Hunter Biden actually appeared publicly on Capitol Hill, answering questions of, where's Hunter with, I am right here. He is offering to testify to Congress publicly about his business dealings, but refusing to comply with a subpoena to be answered to investigators in private. Here's what Hunter had to say.
But I'm also here today to correct how the MAGA right has portrayed me for their political purposes. For 6 years, I have been the target of the unrelenting Trump attack machine, shouting, "Where's Hunter?" Well, here's my answer. I am here. Let me state as clearly as I can. My father was not financially involved in my business, not as a practicing lawyer, not as a board member of Burisma, not in my partnership with a Chinese private businessman, not in my investments at home nor abroad, and certainly not as an artist. By cherry-picking lines from a bank statement, manipulating texts I sent, editing the testimony of my friends and former business partners, and misstating personal information that was stolen from me. There is no fairness or decency in what these Republicans are doing. I am here to testify at a public hearing today to answer any of the committee's legitimate questions.
So, Krystal, there's a lot actually going on there. First of all, I believe that's the first time he's ever acknowledged that the Biden laptop is real. Because he said it was stolen from me. Now, first of all, it wasn't stolen. He was so high on drugs that he forgot that he left his laptop there.
I thought it bore all the hallmarks of Russian disinformation or whatever.
Now, there's a lot going on. I do love how he has to list all of his shady things, like in my Chinese private equity firm, in my board membership of Burisma. Also on the art piece, it just so happened that, Democratic donors happened to pay top dollar for brand new artists.
It's just that extraordinary.
Okay. There's a lot to be said, I think, about that. It does, though, come at the same time that the House Republicans are now likely to hold Biden in contempt the way that the Democrats did for Steve Bannon when he refused to comply with the subpoena. Here is James Comer and Jim Jordan immediately responding to Hunter's statements. Here's what they had to say on Capitol Hill immediately after.
Issued a lawful subpoena to the president's son that we expect him to come in and be deposed. This is a normal process in an investigation. This has been a serious, credible, transparent investigation from day one. We've published 4 bank memorandums. We've had countless press conferences. This is an investigation about public corruption at the highest levels. We have accumulated mountains of evidence that's concerning to an overwhelming majority of Americans. We have specific questions in there, and I think we're going to allow you in there to see the piles and piles of documents, of bank statements, of emails, of text messages that we've worked very hard on in this committee over the last 8 or 9 months.
Finally, I would say this. Mr. Biden's counsel and the White House have both argued that the reason he couldn't come for a deposition was because there wasn't a formal vote for an impeachment inquiry. Well, that's going to happen in a few hours. We think it's going to pass. We think the House of Representatives will go on record with the power that solely resides in the House to say we are in an official impeachment inquiry phase of our oversight. And when that happens, we'll see what their excuse is then. They should have been here today, but once we take that vote, we expect him to come in for his interview, for his deposition. And frankly, we'll also, I think, look at contempt proceedings as we move forward.
So, Krystal, so the beef around public versus private, I know it sounds nebulous, but from what I understand and what I've looked into, the public proceeding will not be able to last as long in the way that the private ones go. So the private ones, as we saw with Devin Archer and others, not only are you testifying under oath, but you're not just testifying to members of Congress, you're testifying as well to investigators, people who are deputized lawyers who work for the House of Representatives, for the committee. So it's more of like a police proceeding than you would think of like a public hearing. And in that, they would go probably 9-10 hours in some cases, and they'd be like, what about this payment? What about this payment? All of this under oath. And if you lie, of course, you're going to be violating it, and you'd be held in contempt and charged with that. So that is the beef over that. Now, in terms of what Comer and Jordan are looking into and what they're going with, the latest report that I have seen that looks like the most direct thing that should be looked at was this from just last week. Hunter Biden's company made direct payments to Joe Biden. These involved the earnings on Hunter Biden's company that were then made directly to President Biden. Now, this is being billed by the Biden team as Hunter having paid him back for, I think
personal
it's cars,
loans,
personal loans, etc. It's not necessarily legal, but I'm not sure yet if the paperwork involves there then. It does, though, of course, raise a question of like, well, what are you doing it for? I actually think the sketchiest thing, and that you weren't there whenever I covered this, was the main thing that the big red flag from Hunter's spending over 2017 to 2020, whenever he was on drugs and all of that, was not all of the payments to hookers and all that, because that was actually itemized. It was the 1.7. Yeah, I also wanted to say, what is the difference between hookers and adult entertainment? I'm still trying to figure that out, because that's like 600 grand whenever you combine that, but that's a whole other conversation. Is the $1.7 million in ATM withdrawals of cash. Cash. And so that's actually the one where there's most area for inquiry of corruption and who are you paying to. As I said at the time, presumably a large chunk of that went to drug dealers. I do find it difficult to believe that he was able to even consume and still be alive $1.7 million worth of drugs, because that's an
exceptional guy.
Maybe, I mean, he is exceptional in a lot of ways. Anyway, I'm curious what you think about all this.
I mean, it's such a mess because, listen, obviously I want public officials to be investigated for corruption. I want them to be held accountable for corruption. I want there to be a much more stringent standard of corruption than what the Supreme Court, even counts as corruption at this point. I don't think there's any doubt that Hunter was trading on the Biden name and his dad's access to power and insinuating to these various shady characters he's doing business with that he could get him X or Y or Z. I mean, why else do you put Hunter Biden on boards and pay him, invest in his funds, et cetera, et cetera? Why else do you buy his artwork? I don't think there's, to me, there's no question that there's a very high level of shadiness. But Republicans have been investigating this for a year now, and they really haven't come up with much. So the other piece of this, on the public versus private testimony, I understand their perspective that you lay down of like, no, we want to go through this other process that's behind closed doors, so it's not like a circus in the theater, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're Hunter Biden, you're also thinking, number one, there was, Steve Bannon and other Trump-related people who refused to testify when they were subpoenaed, so the precedent has been set. And number two, if you do it behind closed doors, then they can, and we've seen this before, including with Devon Archer, selectively leak the parts that may be out of context, may be misleading, that they feel are the most damning, whereas he apparently feels some level of confidence that he's able to testify publicly, that it would come out at least okay for him. And it's not a good look for Republicans that they're afraid of that. It's like, all right, this guy's here, he wants to testify. Like, what are you afraid of? If you won't do it behind closed doors, why not take the next best thing? With regard to the impeachment investigation, I sort of feel similarly. Like, first of all, unfortunately, I feel like no one really even cares about these impeachment inquiries anymore. This is more a stop to the base than any sort of a legitimate fact-finding mission. This is impeachment inquiries are now just sort of like a standard issue part of politics. And some of the haziness of what this impeachment inquiry is even really about was laid out when one Republican was asking another, like, what are actually the high crimes and misdemeanors that we're looking into? And they couldn't just succinctly define it. Yeah. So I don't know. To me at this point, this is like the least of Joe Biden's worries. And I think Republicans are more performing for their base to show like, no, we're not a mess. No, we're not a train wreck. We're actually getting things done here, than they are making any, real like attempts at fighting corruption or even appealing to a broader political base than their constituents. It's
definitely an intra-GOP issue. It's also a thing of retribution. They did it twice to Trump. They did it. They had multiple. They leaked all the. Remember how many times did Adam Schiff leak Mueller investigation testimony and all that? So they're like, screw them. We're going to do the exact same thing back. I do agree. I think it's going to be normalized. I think it is now basically every president is going to have some sort of impeachment inquiry against him. I am not necessarily against it for corruption purposes. Especially, I'm really enjoying getting all the visibility into the first family's finances. You're like, oh, that's very interesting. We have this going on. The president's brother is being called to testify. The more that we normalize like shame against trading and openness, I actually think it's a net benefit to all of that. So I would like to see Hunter Biden testify in some sort, either publicly or privately. I absolutely, I mean, the tax investigation was incredibly eye-opening. I'm really glad that the judge stepped in and was like, this is too sweetheart of a deal, because the public actually does deserve to know about all this cash that is being here, about the fact that Burisma changed his payroll and cut it in half after Trump was elected and Biden no longer had control of the Ukraine portfolio. It's like the most naked thing that you can see in all of his financial records. So I think all of that should be normalized. In terms of this investigation, all of that, obviously, they don't have a, quote, smoking gun yet. The payments that they directly have been able to prove so far are either not papered over properly, they haven't been able to show, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to continue to investigate it now, per se. I don't think politically, it depends. There is some polling to indicate that if people had been able to get more information about the quote-unquote Hunter Biden laptop, that then they would have been able to have they would have made a different choice. I'm not sure how true that actually is, but you never know. If they do stumble across something or any of that, it becomes a political scandal for the White House. You could see a scenario where that would have some impact on the election. I don't think it'll be number one, especially because Trump is the number two person that other people are going to be weighing up against. But you don't know.
I'm sure. And it's certainly possible that they come up with, that they're able to find, now that they have these other tools at their disposal, something that's more of a direct link. But, I also think the other piece of this is, because it's been very one-sided and because there's been a lot of overreaching and overstatements about what it is that they've identified thus far, anybody outside of the Republican base is just sort of like dismissing this as a Republican witch hunt and not paying too close attention to the details here of exactly what's going on.
Right.
So at this, who knows what could develop in the future? You never know. But as of today, as I said, I think this is like the least of Joe Biden's worries. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.